Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Johnny.
And today we're going to talk about what happened at Roanoake.
I am somewhat familiar with what happened to the Roanoake settlers, but for the people listening at home, do you want to just quickly explain what led up to the events?
Yeah, so I actually didn't know much about Roanoake. My history is shocking, to say the least. I'm not quite sure what qualifies me to be on a podcast like this. I didn't know anything about them. Essentially, they were actually a group, I guess, of British people who were chosen to go and live in the New World, America, and settle there. And they went missing. Summary.
It's a very good summary.
Yeah, okay, so a bit more detail. It was actually Queen Elizabeth I. She needed money and pirates were a thing. So, she wanted to kind of cash in wherever she could. She actually put a team together to essentially start settling in America. This led to a couple of trips there. Mapping, for example, that's a thing I'd never even thought about. I didn't even really consider how people knew where stuff was. I guess they just sort of sailed off and...
Often the settlers of the New World are likened to the first space explorers, Neil Armstrong and the like. However, I think that they're a little bit different in the sense that we had a lot prepared for when we went into space. They had ground teams and everything. These people were going off into the unknown, completely cut off, and were completely by themselves.
Yeah, it was crazy. And we're talking a long time ago. So 1584 was the first trip where they went to explore and map. And then they had another trip in 1585 and came back in 1586. They failed. They had no food and they were attacked by natives. So these first two trips didn't go very well.
No. Unsurprisingly, they were treated like the robbers that they were by the natives and were driven out the first time. And not knowing what they were coming up against or where they were going, they didn't bring the appropriate supplies to survive.
No, they didn't seem to learn from their mistakes, I guess, either. They went back for a third time. So before we go on to the third time is the time that we're going to talk about. But there's actually a guy, John White. He's relatively important, I guess, here. He went on the second trip. A great map person, apparently.
Yes, responsible for some of the best maps to come out of the 16th century.
Yeah, and that was one of them. He went on the second trip, he drew the map, he knew Roanoake, he knew the place.
He knew how hard it was.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, he was then chosen to lead the third settlement. I guess that was a big part of the reason, really. He knew what he was getting into.
I think they wanted someone with experience to be the leader of the team and hopefully make a more successful run of it.
Yeah, I'm not sure how successful they were. They went, and within a month, he had to actually come home. They'd run out of supplies, and he came back. Now, I just think, I don't know, he's been there twice. Twice it failed. They turned up. There was no evidence of the second team. Apparently, they'd left a couple of soldiers there, and none. Apparently, they found some bones of enough for one person. So already there's a bit of history about this place not being great.
No, exactly. I don't know what they were expecting. Were they expecting there to be a Tesco's Metro that had popped up in the time? I don't know how you could, for a second time, not take enough supplies with you.
Yeah, a month. I mean, he'd turned around and come back within a month. Like, you'd at least surely prepare to be away from home for a year. Or is that madness? I don't know
if it's limitations of what they could carry due to the vessels or just bad foresight.
Maybe. Okay, so they arrive then in July 1587, and there's 90 men, 17 women, and 11 children. It's not great for the women. I'm guessing they're going to have to do all the childbearing as it is.
I don't like those odds.
No. Apparently, it had been intended for them to settle further up in Chesapeake Bay, what is now known as Virginia, but they didn't. So, again, one thing I'm not clear on is, were they meant to go there? Had he actually mapped Roanoake, or had he mapped a bit further up?
No, he did map Roanoake. It could have been weather. They could have missed. Navigation those days was in its early forms, and just getting to remotely near where they were going, it was an achievement worth noting.
Yeah, I suppose I didn't really have a sat-nav back then.
No sat-navs, no AA guides or anything, no TripAdvisor.
I'm not sure if anyone would advise a trip to Roanoake after these three, but here we are. So a quick note about John White, one thing that I do think is, I just think it's awesome. Virginia Dare, must have heard of her.
Yeah, his daughter.
Granddaughter.
Oh, granddaughter, sorry.
Yeah, she was born there. She was actually the first English baby to be born in America. So that's kind of a big deal.
So first American, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And when she was
can't clarify that. The first English American. Obviously, the natives were the first Americans.
Yeah.
They just didn't call themselves that.
And when she was just 3 days old, White returned to England. So I'm guessing at this point they probably thought he was going to be gone maybe 6 months. It took him about 3 months to get there.
Yeah, I think that was a good assumption. So maybe they had enough supplies for 6 months, realised it was going to be a little bit more difficult than they thought it was. They weren't getting set up as quickly as they wanted to, and thought, send him back ahead of time. I hope they didn't get to starvation and then be like, oh, we better do something about this.
Yeah, I hope so too. But unfortunately, it didn't take him 6 months. He didn't actually come back until August 1590. So yeah, that's 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah. Virginia's third birthday. So it's well timed at least. It would have been a nice surprise.
It would have been a nice surprise, yes, but it was him that got the surprise.
Yeah, it really was. So in case you haven't gathered by now, John went back to Roanoake and everyone was gone, just vanished. And this is where the mystery part really comes in. You know, we're what, 400, 500 years later? And no one knows still.
No, it's very intriguing as to how an entire population disappears. What was it that John found when he got there?
Nothing. In short, I mean, there was the only clue, and I say the only clue, it really, really was the only clue. They found the word Croatoan carved into a tree and crow carved into a post, which you have to assume was going to become the word Croatoan unless they were trying to warn of a crow attack or something like that.
Yes, we've all been there. We've all written on a piece of paper and realised we haven't left enough space and had to start writing smaller. When you're carving, that's more difficult to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, did they have knives then? This isn't easy carving.
Yes, they had ships. Did they have knives?
I suppose they did.
Had knives for a good few thousand years, I imagine.
They're getting on with things then. Fair enough. I suppose you beheaded people back then as well, didn't you? They knew their knife game.
They didn't use a knife for that.
Well, no, but blade.
They wouldn't. That would have been an awful thing to watch. Just a man hacking away for half an hour.
Oh, anyway, we've taken a turn. So
your history is truly rubbish.
It really is. I feel like I'm going to learn the most out of all of these podcasts.
We hosted history. Most of this is history.
Some of it more recent, though.
True.
Anyway, moving on. Found the Croatoan word on the tree. Now, Croatoan Island was about 50 miles away from Roanoake, and it actually was home to the Croatan tribe, a native tribe.
So easy then, just pop over to Croatoan and have a look.
Well, you say that, but he had 3 attempts and went home.
3 attempts and he went home. Did he like his children very much? Now,
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess we don't know enough about the situation. It wasn't his boat. He wasn't the, captain person.
No, in those days, rich people funded these trips, and if you weren't making money, you had to go home. It wasn't like he was on his yacht.
I mean, ultimately, let's remember as well, this was all, pushed forward by Queen Elizabeth. If she doesn't see things going well, I'm pretty sure heads will come off. I mean, she was Henry VIII's daughter.
Yeah, beheading is in her blood. Yeah. Her mother was Anne Boleyn, wasn't it?
Yes, something else I learned at the beginning of this podcast. Like I said, and we actually learned about Henry VIII at school. So whereas I'm pretty sure Roanoke didn't come up, Henry VIII did, and I am appalled to tell you that I didn't know the Queen Elizabeth family. Thought I'd get that in there.
Yeah, so she knows a beheading or two with her mum being Anne Boleyn.
She does. And then, of course, you've got pirates to think about. Again, I'm not saying that a pirate was sailing his ship. I don't know anything about who sailed him back there. But, there's stuff going on. That sailor person would have had other things to worry about. They thought they would just be dropping John White off at the island and they'd go on with whatever it was they were doing next. So I can kind of see why, if 3 trips failed, which I think was due to illness and weather, then they might have to give up and go home. His choice was to stay there by himself or go back. So
by modern standards, 50 miles isn't far. But when you're in a boat made of wood...
And a hand-drawn map.
50 miles with bad weather can kill a crew, and a captain isn't going to risk his crew so he could find a few people. There's probably more people on the boat than there was in the landing party. Yeah.
So White went home, lived on a farm, and lived out his days there, unfortunately, and never found out what happened to the settlers.
Have we got any theories as to what may have happened to them?
Oh, so many. So the most obvious one is the Croatoan clue. There is the idea that they merged or went for help to Croatoan Island. Now, their history with the natives is not great, so I don't know how I feel about this one. And also, one thing that we haven't mentioned is when I say there were no other clues, I mean nothing. There were no bones. There were no remains of any kind. There was no sign of destruction. Things had been supposedly carefully disassembled and put away or moved or put down. There was no clues as to, disaster or anything. So if they left and went there, it seemed to have been all very friendly.
It could have been friendly, and there was a lot of documented cases where natives would welcome people into their tribes and assimilate. Not always non-violently, and a lot of the time it was the women and children that got to assimilate and the men got to die. But there is a chance that they took pity on these people and took them in to feed them and house them and make sure that they survived.
Maybe. Again, 50 miles is a long way, though, back then, and I'm guessing they didn't have a boat. I mean, the Croatoan Island inhabitants probably did, but...
I imagine they could have fashioned some sort of boat if they wanted to. And there wasn't just Croatoan Island, there was other natives in the area that they could have gone to. I can't remember the name of the nearest one.
Oh, I don't know. There is quite a lot. So, but I mean, that kind of brings us nicely onto our next point, relocation. Even though Croatoan was on the tree, there's nothing to say that wasn't their intention. They got in their boat, realised they couldn't make it, and actually decided to relocate somewhere else. What if they went inland? No one was looking for them. So... Not then, anyway.
There was other settlements that they could have headed to that were within what they called walking distance at that time. A few hundred miles away that they could have headed to. They could have realised that life wasn't sustainable where they were and that help wasn't coming. Because they didn't even know if John was coming back. They just knew that he was supposed to be back in 6 months, and it was 3... We don't know. Well, it could have been 7. The next day they went missing, but they wouldn't have known when he was coming back. And they would have had to fend for themselves and worry about themselves.
I mean, it's not even like they could have written a letter. It's just, I think it's hard to comprehend, isn't it? Like how long ago this really was.
Yeah, there was no email. They had no way of contacting England at this point unless a boat came.
Yeah.
And if you leave a piece of paper stuck to a tree, the chance of that being there when the person turns up is quite low. So I think carving was probably the most sensible option you could have, but it's quite a lengthy process. But you would have thought they'd add a gone to or don't go.
Yeah,
attack spy.
Yeah. And if they were being attacked, would they really have had time to carve something into a tree with that much? That's quite a lot of letters. So, I don't know. But again, the attack theory actually doesn't gain a lot of weight from what I've read because, again, this comes up a lot. There were no bones.
Well, yes, but it's a large area. They could have told them to get in the sea.
Well, that's interesting. They also, I guess, if they were sailing to the Croatoan Island, could have, failed, especially if they were building small ships or small rafts or some way to transport that many women and children. They could have just,
It's vast. The bones could be anywhere, and it's not like they brought CSI with them. Like a man got up a hill, looked around and went, nope, no bones. And that was the end of it.
Yeah, pretty much.
So it really could have been that they just didn't find the bones and haven't found the bones because they're looking in a very vast area. Or, like I said, they could have given the option, we'll slaughter you, or you can get in the sea. Which option are you going to take?
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't like water. I'd probably go for the slaughter.
My money is on this one, if we're being honest. It's probably the most likely outcome. They had a bad reputation. They weren't doing the greatest of things. They were stealing land and resources.
You think they were attacked?
I think they were attacked, and it lends credence to why everything was disassembled as well. Because although it would be romantic to burn the place to the ground, living off the land and like the natives did, are they going to give up those resources, or are they going to harvest them for their own needs and take them with them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that does make sense.
So you could burn the place to the ground, but you could take all that wood that's pre-prepared in house shape and use it for your own settlement.
Yeah. I mean, those are the two, I would say, more sensible theories of the two. We're going to get onto some real fun ones in a minute. But you've got relocation and, conflict with local tribes. So whether it was Croatoan or not, I think the two of those are the ones that make the most sense. Interestingly, in 1998, so obviously, recent in terms of how long ago this was, archaeologists actually found a gun, some English farthings and a signet ring on Croatoan Island. Now, I mean, they could be there because they took them. They could be there because, we're talking hundreds of years later. I don't know that that's evidence either way of what happened.
It's evidence that some English people were there, but why and how is going to be a mystery.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the Croatoan tribe are believed to have succumbed to infectious disease and became an extinct tribe in the 17th century. So we can't ask. I realised that the people that would be alive today would not be the ones that were alive then. My history's not that bad, or at least my maths isn't. But I guess if there was a link back to them in some way, that would have been
another little present that we took over for them. Some infectious diseases.
Yeah, I suppose it would have been us, wouldn't it?
More than likely, because they would have had immunity to their own. Like, on the scale of wiping your tribe out, we brought the Rona over with us.
So I'm going to talk about some further theories now. I think we can both agree that those are the more sensible ones.
And more likely.
Yeah. Some sort of integration, merging or attack, essentially, are the ones that make sense, even if they're not the ones you want
or
to
believe. Or a bit of all of them.
Yeah, and that is actually, I think, what I would go with, although you haven't heard what else I've got on this list yet. So we'll start with the maybe more possible animals. That one's not too out there. But again, it keeps coming back to this no bones situation.
What, they were killed by animals?
Yeah, all of them.
If they were weak and some of them had already died, they could have succumbed and then been eaten by animals. But I don't think they would have en masse been attacked and lost the battle.
No, and where are the bones? I'm telling you, this comes up so many times, this bone thing.
I think the bones can't be evidence that they're not dead there. And wildlife could have taken the bones. If they were attacked, would you give them a nice burial? Or would you chuck them in the sea? Get rid of them. Don't forget, a rotting corpse is going to be a large source of germs and bacteria and other nasty things. You're not going to leave it hanging around. You're either going to burn it or you're going to throw them in the sea.
Yeah, interestingly, they did later find, and I'm talking sort of more recent, a burial site. Coffins had Christian markers, which of course was a very British thing at the time, but there was absolutely no proof whatsoever that they were the Roanoake colony. So it's kind of
3 visits as well.
Mind.
It could have been from any one of those visits, especially if they left the soldiers there in a smaller group.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, they would have had time as well between visits. So, okay, well, next. Plague. Feels pretty relevant right now.
Illness. Without medical care and proper supplies, they would have succumbed pretty quickly.
Comes back to this bone thing again. I don't think we need to go over it again, but I'll just point out that people on the internet really stick onto these bones.
People on the internet are dumb.
Okay, so the next one
Hi, people on the internet.
Okay, so the next one is, there's a theory about the, I guess, danger or foreboding of the actual word Croatoan. Have you heard this one?
No.
So Edgar Allan Poe, who was delirious in his final days before death, uttered Croatoan as one of his final words.
He was a creepy dude. I think he would have made every effort to be creepy to the last. Could have been having fun with you.
Well, there's more. Croatoan was found written in Amelia Earhart's diary.
What nosy bugger's been going through Amelia Earhart's diary?
Plus, didn't she fly around there? Isn't it possible that she would have had it written down in terms of, don't land here or something.
Navigational purposes.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't going to land where there was no airstrip. Her goal was to fly around the world. Do they have a date of when it was in her diary?
No, but I mean, she wasn't very old. So, but it gets worse. Horror writer Ambrose Bierce carved it into his bedpost, the bed he died in 1913.
I mean, a horror writer, like, these people are going to want to leave their mark. And if it was a story that everyone was aware of, we don't know that they weren't just being dramatic in their final days.
Maybe.
But without further evidence, what was it supposed to be Croatoans that killed him in his sleep?
I think it's just more that this word has, like, I guess, spooky connotations.
From the horror writers.
Yeah, well, also in 1888, stagecoach robber Black Bart carved it into his cell before he was released from prison and never seen again.
Black Bart was a pirate. He probably had been there.
I'll admit, the fact that he was released from prison and never seen again, I mean, what were they expecting him to return and say hello? Like, especially if he was a criminal, you'd just run and be like, yeah, see ya, get on your ship and off you go.
I don't know as much as I'd like to about pirates, but I imagine he went off to the Caribbean or Africa or India. Wasn't hanging around the jail cell making friends with people.
Well, the last one on this whole word of Croatoan thing was a ship called the Carroll A. Deering, and they wrote it in their logbook before they crashed in 1921, and their entire crew was missing. But even I'll say that this one's a bit, well, it's not strong because they were near Croatoan Island, so that really could have been that either they were going there or going past there or something. But I think all these things together have given people the idea that the word Croatoan is really spooky.
It does lend to the spookiness somewhat. It's creating an atmosphere. It's involved in a lot of death, but I think that's more about human imagination than it is about what happened to anybody there.
Maybe. What about demonic control?
Well, now we're really getting into the crazy side of the internet.
Yeah.
Unlikely.
But possible. Is this what we're saying?
Well, no, I'm trying to be nice, but no.
Even I'll agree on this one that I think there is a lot of more likely scenarios.
We're discounting the likely stories because of no bones, but we're going to throw in demonic possession.
I didn't say I
with
believed
no
it.
Evidence. Like, we can just band it. I don't know. Again, it comes from a time where the unknown was demonic and the spiritual and...
Well, there's sort of evidence. I mean, the Croatan tribe actually believed that there was a spirit on the island, and if angered, it turned you into a tree or stones. So the colony could actually still be there. And I guess that is sort of like demonic-ish, some sort of angry spirit. Is that not a demon?
Well, it's about terms and references of where you're from, so that would be a demon to us or an evil spirit to them. I mean, I quite like the idea that they're all trees.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. But also really sad because it meant they would have been there for years.
And frustrating.
Yeah.
They're just like... John's looking around like, I swear I heard something. And some evil bastard's carved in them. That's going to hurt.
Yeah, the natives also believed in a spirit that took over your body if you resorted to cannibalism. Now, cannibalism is something we also haven't touched on here. How do you feel about that? I actually think that's possibly, again, one of the more gruesome but possible ones.
They wouldn't be the only settlers to resort to cannibalism, that's for sure.
No, they weren't. It actually happened, it was documented as happening in Jamestown in the 1600s, which of course really wasn't that much longer after
No,
this.
and I don't know the dates, but the Donner Party that were trying to cross from one side of America to the other ran into trouble, ran out of resources and resorted to cannibalism. That's a very interesting story that I think we should touch on at some point.
Yeah, definitely. I have to say as well, this one also explains this whole bones problem that the internet has, in that apparently there was a herbal healing remedy that you ground up bones into a powder. So, you know, either the people that ate them could have then ground up their bones and used it as a remedy. So it gets past this bone problem.
This bone thing really irks me. There's
It comes up a lot. This is why I'm mentioning it. Like, it's not me that feels like there's a problem about the bones, but seriously, every single like theory you look at, it's like bones, 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 bones.
Yeah, I think people have watched too many TV programs. They're is it supposed to be outlined in chalk as well? Like, animals, anything could take these bones, and like they said, they've used it in herbal remedies and things like that. So, absence of bones isn't proof that something didn't happen. What's the famous saying? Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence.
Yes, I suppose so. And the last one that I've got is that the Croatan tribe believed in an evil spirit that turned people greedy, violent and paranoid. I mean, I think that kind of sums up everything we've just been talking about. It could be true.
A spirit, I don't think. But those traits, if you're getting hungry, you're getting delirious, they're all going to be something that you witness and succumb to, and they're not the kind of thing you want when you're building a new society.
No, definitely not.
Now, there's one theory that I know you haven't got written down, but I have read online a lot, and it's the loosest one because there is no evidence or basis for it whatsoever.
Well, that's true for a lot of these.
But that's that they were abducted by aliens, which is fun.
Ooh.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised that you think this is the loosest because you believe in aliens.
Please don't tell people that. I believe in life on other planets. I don't believe that people are coming down and sticking things up our bottoms and abducting us. But yeah, like that's literally the strength of the argument. It's a very simplified, well, aliens did it. And it can't be proven, can't be disproven. Yeah. But I do like the idea of it.
I mean, in terms of what we've discussed here, it's definitely possible. Like, out of all of them, I mean, yeah, aliens. But then why would you pick on a, settlement of 100 people in, frankly, what would have been at the time the middle of nowhere?
You wouldn't. It wasn't aliens.
Okay.
It's just something that people on the internet have said, and I found it funny.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I mean, my favourite out of all of them was demonic control. I'm going to go with that.
You're just going to...
Yeah.
We don't know, so I'm going to pick one.
Sure. Well, we don't know.
No, that's true. I'm going to go with killed by natives.
Very sensible. There's one last thing I'm going to mention. Dare stones. Have you heard about this bit?
Not a thing.
Okay, so there was a Canadian tourist in 1937. He found a stone in a swamp about 80 miles away from Roanoake, and it had some writing on it. And it said, Ananias Dare and Virginia went hence unto heaven 1591.
Who was Ananias?
The mum. Actually, no, I'm not sure. I think she might have been...
Ah, got you.
Yeah, I don't know, because the mum was called Eleanor. I think it might have been the father.
Okay, well, that's strong evidence that they died.
Well, is it, though? Because it was just carved into a stone. And
all
this was found...
gravestones are just carved into stone, but...
Oh, yeah, it could have been a gravestone. I thought it was just like a message.
It could have been a great... Did it? So throughout all this, you've been sitting on that little nugget.
Well, they didn't, as I say, it was 1937.
Oh, they found their gravestones, but I don't know what happened to them.
It was 1937 that this guy found it, 80 miles away from Roanoke. But of course, you're talking 400 years later. So not at that point, I guess 300. But, it's possible, I guess, that could have washed out. It's found in a swamp, so...
Yeah, but a swamp might not have been a swamp 300 years ago.
That's true. Well, they took it to a university, and there was a professor who was actually really interested in it and, sort of wanted to look into it more. The mistake that he made, unfortunately, was that he put an ad out to ask if anyone else had found any of these stones, and he offered a reward. So they ended up with a bunch of stones that they pretty much all agreed were a hoax. But it's generally believed that the first one might have been genuine.
Unfortunately, I don't think it was a time of carbon dating and all the fancy things we have now to...
No. But they have looked at it now, and more recent historians and Elizabethan scholars suggest that actually the use of the initials, so on the second side it was signed EWD, which was Eleanor White Dare, Virginia's mum. Apparently they didn't do that. Apparently the initials like that wasn't a thing back then. That was pretty rare. So that kind of points to it perhaps not being real, but...
It could have been a hoax. We're in the realm of the true mysterious here, because these are answers that no one will ever know, apart from the fact that it wasn't aliens or demons or ghosts.
Well, they are actually doing DNA testing, or they have done and will continue to do. There are people, still looking at this. And I guess it's one of those things that someone would love to be able to solve. But ultimately, I think even if you found some sort of genetic way to show that you were some sort of descendant, it still doesn't really prove what happened to the whole settlement.
No, unfortunately, you don't pass down knowledge. So, or some people believe you do, but I don't believe you do.
Yeah. So, in a lot of ways, I guess we won't be able to answer what happened to the Roanoake colony, but I'm going to go with demonic control. It sounds fun.
I'm going with they were killed by angry natives.
Which sounds sensible.
Does sound sensible, and I think it's the only one that has any real evidence to it.
I'll give you that. My evidence is pretty weak.
So we're going to remain divided on this topic, but as I would have predicted, Joe's going with demons and I'm going with death.
Yeah, absolutely. Demons are fun. I'll put a picture of the Dare Stones up on our website, which you can find at www.mysteryoflifepodcast.co.uk. You'll also be able to find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Mystery of Life Pod. And I think that ends it there.
Yeah, I think that's all we can say about the subject, really.
Yep, demons. Bye!
Bye!